Hey folks, this is Kelani. We can finally get a real look at how everything will change when it comes to leveling up in World of Warcraft after patch 7.3.5 goes live. There's a whole bunch of changes on how scaling is going to work in the old expansion areas to smooth out the leveling process and make things a little less trivial overall. These changes also allow you to complete zone quests without being pressured to move on to new areas due to experience rates because everything just scales to you. So let's dive in and see how things are currently playing out on the patch 7.3.5 PTR. So a lot has changed. If you've leveled up recently, you might actually regret it slightly because leveling up through the world is going to be a bit of a different story after 7.3.5 goes live. Most zones will scale to your level, which means no matter where you are, if you can pick up a quest, then you can complete it and hand it in for an appropriate amount of experience. You don't really have to worry about picking up a quest and doing a whole bunch of other stuff and then coming back to hand in a green or even a grey quest. You can also freely dungeon while questing without having to worry about the same thing. Head into a dungeon with a bunch of quests already completed and level up a few times in the dungeon. When you're done with the dungeon, those quests, which would have been worth less experience after leveling up, will now still award level appropriate experience. It's really a fantastic change. But the changes don't just apply to quests. It seems like overall the amount of experience required to level up has been increased by a pretty significant amount. I know leveling from 1 to 60 has been smoothed out overall, but the amount of experience required has increased quite a bit. Another interesting change is to mobs' health. Almost across the board, mob health has been increased, so regular monsters have more health, named monsters have even more health, that includes the ones required for quests, and elites and rares might actually prove to be a challenge once again for anyone not paying full attention to what they pull. I actually had to run away once or twice when I ended up aggroing too many mobs, which is definitely something I haven't experienced in quite a while. Even though monsters take a few more hits to kill, it seems like the experience gained from killing monsters has increased as well, so instead of just plowing down tens of monsters in a few seconds, you'll only be able to get through a few in the same amount of time, but the experience you actually get should remain somewhat the same, which actually feels way better. If a monster just falls over from one hit, that's kind of lame, having to work just a little bit to take down that wolf, or bear, or thug. It feels meatier, it feels more satisfying, like you're actually a simple adventurer or wanderer starting out his journey, rather than already being an overpowered demigod who slaughters 100 enemies with a sideways glance. To add to this, heirlooms have taken quite a large hit to their overall power level as well. They still provide the same experience bonuses, so you'll still want to use them if you want to level up a bit faster, but they're not going to be as powerful stat-wise after the patch. Every heirloom has had their stats reduced across all item level ranges, so you might not have to replace the gear and you still get the experience bonus, but the heirlooms are much more in line with what you would actually be equipping otherwise. You can definitely feel the difference between the heirlooms on live and the heirlooms on PTR, and the difference between having heirlooms or not comes down to that experience bonus more than anything else now. You're not going to be one-shotting things just because you're in heirloom gear. I think this is another good change. Heirlooms were designed to increase the leveling speed of future alts. We've already been through all that stuff more than enough times, so heirlooms lets us get through it again a little faster. But they probably went too far. Increasing our experience rate and completely trivializing the entire leveling process might have been a bit heavy-handed. The experience bonus alone might have been enough. So overall the pace of leveling is going to be a bit slower, I think. It certainly felt that way with how far I've got on the PTR right now. I think that's a great thing for newcomers. If you start up World of Warcraft and you're literally never in danger for the first 100 levels, that's got to feel a little weird. It certainly doesn't help teach players how to protect themselves or use their abilities to their maximum potential. It's no wonder players can get to max level and then have no clue what they're doing when the entire leveling process just let them breeze through. So this would give them a better chance of learning how their abilities work together to kill monsters a little faster and more efficiently, while giving them a better sense of being in this world. Those bears aren't just going to fall over if you give them a poke. That elite is an elite for a reason. You better have a plan, or at least a friend or two if you're going to take it on. At least that's how I hope all of this shapes up. The problem I see is for anyone who has already finished their leveling quota. If you've gone from 1 to 110 a few times already, hearing that leveling is going to take even longer after this patch probably doesn't sound very great. We're all going to have to level up the allied races if we want their heritage armor sets, and let's be honest, who doesn't? So that's already 1 or 2 characters we're going to have to go through all of this again. I'm pretty excited myself, but I do know quite a few people who are complaining that these changes just drag out an already way too long leveling process. I feel like there's going to be quite a few ups and downs, but I think these changes are definitely for the greater good in World of Warcraft. So let's have a look at how your leveling process might unfold. You'll start in the same starting areas, which are some of the only areas in the game which won't scale with the current expansion. The starting areas only scale from 1 to 20, so sadly you won't be able to kill boars over and over and over again in Elwynn Forest to get to max level. I think this does make sense. You should feel like that. You should outscale them early on. They're the starting zones, and you don't really want to hang around too much. After the starting areas, every other zone in vanilla will scale up to level 60. Each zone also has a lower boundary, which is right around the level you would usually have been able to start questing there before the scaling was introduced. So that means if you want to go to Westfall first and you get to level 20 there, that's perfectly fine. All the quests you do will scale with you as you level up, so even if a quest is supposed to be level 10 or 11, and you fancy completing it up at level 20, that's now a level 20 quest. You can then hop on over to Red Ridge and quest there as you usually would, except instead of those starting quests being level 15, they're whatever level you are, so you could happily stay in Red Ridge as long as you want to as well. After that you can go wherever you want, as long as you meet the lower level boundary of a questing area. To help you in your adventures, quest boards have been placed in more locations. You might remember these vaguely. They weren't really used for a great deal, but they could give you a quest to head on over to a new questing location. Usually people just use them to pick up quests for the next expansion, but on the PTR they actually give you a few options for questing areas, just like how we were given options to pursue different artifacts. A little window pops up with a few choices, as well as a description of what's going on in that zone, and what you'll end up having to deal with. It's a little precursor to the story of the zone, so if something sounds fun, you can pick up that quest and head on over. With the way scaling works, you could end up going through 1 to 60 in a really weird way. You could do Westfall, then Darkshore, and then Loch Modan, all the while gaining experience appropriate for your level. That's pretty bonkers if you ask me. The only thing missing from the quest boards are directions to the zones which aren't really tied to the zone you're currently in, giving a player the option of Westfall, Darkshore or Loch Modan while they're in Goldshire is all fine and dandy, but if they pick Darkshore and the only thing they've got to go off now is head to Darkshore, that's not really going to help them at all. Walking them through the process to getting to Darkshore not only allows them to actually quest wherever they want, but introduces new players to the different forms of transportation that can allow you to traverse the world. I do hope something's added in there. I think it would be a great way to introduce that system to new players. So you can pick and choose the zones you want to complete to really create your own leveling adventure. Once again, you don't ever have to worry about green or grey quests again. If you can pick up the quest, you can complete it and gain a decent amount of experience no matter where you are in the world. You can go to zones later than you're supposed to. You can finish off getting to level 60 in any zone you want. This might actually make it easier for people to group up as well. If you remember at the start of Legion, we could pick any of the leveling zones to start with, and it didn't really matter where we went first because everything scaled anyways. If you decided to head on over to a different area and you had a friend who just started playing Legion, they could pick that same area. It didn't matter that you were 3 or 4 levels ahead of them, everything scaled appropriately to both of you, so it was basically as if you were playing at the same level. That can now be applied to the rest of the world. If you're level 50 and haven't done Westfall yet, and you have a friend just start playing and they get to Westfall at level 10, you can both group up, do the quests at the same time and at the same pace. The level 50 character won't suddenly be one-shotting everything because the mobs you're fighting will scale to both of you, and you will both be rewarded according to your level. That's never been an option in any of the old world before, and I think that's really cool. So, you may be worried about your sense of progression and power if everything is scaled to your level, but instead of your power progression while leveling being tied to your actual level, it's more tied to the current expansion. As soon as you ding 60, every level after that takes you further and further away from the vanilla zones. You'll start to overpower them significantly, and as a result you won't be getting appropriate experience. It's time to move on, to either Outlands or Northrend. Both of these expansions now scale from 60 to 80, so it's kind of the same deal. You get to choose where you want to level up, and if you pick Outland and decide halfway through you would actually prefer to finish things off in Northrend, that's now a perfectly viable choice. When you get to level 80, the same thing has happened to the Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria zones. They all scale from 80 to 90. There's a lot more choice available for your leveling path, which is always a great thing when you end up leveling multiple characters. I think the leveling pace will also continue continue at a more steady pace, instead of 1 to 60 being vastly different from 60 to 70 and 70 to 80, etc, etc. It's also going to be interesting when you can't outscale a zone in the current expansion, or current group of expansions when you get past 60. I feel like players who have already gone through Legion might be used to it enough for this not to matter, but I wonder how a new player is going to feel about it. I hope these changes make the game more enjoyable for new players coming in. I am a little worried that they might be overwhelmed with the amount of choices presented to them, but the new quest board should help with that at least a little bit. Now, something we haven't touched on yet is dungeons, which will also scale within your current expansion group. So if you really wanted to, you could hop into a Dead Mines group at level 55. You have every vanilla dungeon available to you all throughout 1 to 60, but if you queue for specific dungeons, you can see that some are greyed out, while others are green, yellow, and orange. I believe if you queue for random, you won't probably see the grey dungeons. You're less likely to see the green ones, and then yellow or orange are fair game. So even though you can be thrown into a wider variety of dungeons at most points while leveling, you can still outlevel some options. I think they retained some semblance of progression with dungeons like this, so you're not stuck running the same thing over and over again. You'll still progress through the dungeon options at a relatively similar pace, while everything is still open to you should you wish to queue for it specifically. Dungeons themselves haven't changed too much when it comes to difficulty, except they receive the same treatment as the monsters out in the world. Everything has more health, so while they won't necessarily do more damage to you, it's definitely going to take longer to clear your way through a dungeon after this patch goes live. I'm pretty sure we get more experience for kills as well, just like everything else, so it might even out somewhat. What's really cool about the changes is that when you get to bosses, they actually feel like a boss instead of just another mob for you to roll over. Bosses having more health means you actually get to see some of the abilities and mechanics the bosses have. They actually have a chance to do something when you don't kill them in 10 seconds flat. It definitely feels more like a dungeon with these changes in place, which should be great for any new players coming through once again. I hope the old timers can appreciate the changes as well, even though they might end up spending a little more time leveling than they might like. So all in all, I do love the changes coming with patch 7.3.5. I think it's an amazingly smart move on Blizzard's part and might revitalize some of the oldest parts of the game, and I'm happy they chose to expand the world scaling technology. It's probably one of the best additions to the World of Warcraft so far. And I'm doubly glad they did something about it while they're adding allied races, so leveling might be a little more tolerable. So that's it for this video. Have you had a chance to check out the leveling changes on the PTR? Are you excited to level up some allied races with the changes in place? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.